My neighbor slipped a note under my door. 3 words. Please don't answer. I didn't know what she meant, until the wall called my name. I moved into the new place on a Thursday evening, just before the rain started. The air smelled like wet concrete and paint, that strange combination of new beginnings and quiet decay. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom on the 4th floor, barely furnished, with walls so thin you could hear the neighbor's television like it was in your own room. Still, it was mine. After months of couch surfing and staying too long at places that weren't really home, it felt like a small victory. The hallway outside was narrow and dim, the kind of place that always seemed to hum with electricity even when the lights were off. The landlord, an older man with hands that shook slightly when he spoke, gave me the keys and mumbled something about the heating being temperamental. He also mentioned the woman in the apartment next door. Keeps to herself, he said. Quiet type. Good tenant. I nodded, not thinking much of it. That night, I unpacked only what I needed, toothbrush, a change of clothes, my laptop, and sat on the floor with takeout. The city outside my window buzzed faintly, a comfort I'd missed. I told myself that this was a fresh start. But around midnight, I heard it. A soft knock. Not on my door, exactly, more like on the wall between my living room and the next apartment. 3 slow taps, evenly spaced. Then silence. I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth, listening. When nothing followed, I shrugged it off as pipes or settling plaster. Old buildings had their sounds. Still, when I lay down to sleep, I could feel that same pattern in my head, 3 taps, a pause, then nothing. The next day, I left early for work. By the time I got back, the hallway smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. My neighbor's door was cracked open, a small wedge of light spilling into the corridor. I hesitated, tempted to say hello, but before I could, the door clicked shut. That night, the knocking returned. Same rhythm, same wall. This time, I knocked back, 3 quick taps, trying to match the pattern. For a moment, there was silence. Then, faintly, a single knock in reply. I waited, pulse quickening. But nothing else came. The next morning, there was a note slipped under my door. Small, written in neat, slanted handwriting. Please don't answer. No name. No explanation. Just that. The note bothered me more than I wanted to admit. It sat on my kitchen counter all morning while I made coffee, the words staring back at me in that calm, deliberate handwriting. Please don't answer. I kept asking myself what that even meant. Don't answer what? The knocking? Or something else entirely? When I left for work, I noticed the hallway again. There was something about it that felt off, maybe the smell, like damp carpet and old wiring. Or maybe it was just that the lights always seemed slightly dimmer near my door, as if the bulbs were giving up faster there than anywhere else. The landlord's office was on the ground floor, but when I knocked, no one answered. That evening, I heard the knocking again. It started earlier this time, just after sunset. 3 slow taps, a pause, then 3 more. I froze, waiting. It stopped. Then, a faint sound, like someone whispering, but through layers of plaster. I pressed my ear to the wall. The voice was too quiet to make out, just a low rhythm, like someone talking to themselves. Hello? I said, before remembering the note. The whispering stopped instantly. I stepped back, heart hammering, and waited. Nothing. The silence felt heavier than before, like the whole building was holding its breath. I went to bed late, headphones in, volume up. But around 3 a.m., my playlist cut off. My phone had died. And in the darkness, I heard something again. Not knocking this time, scratching. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails against drywall. I sat up, straining to hear. It was coming from the same wall. Stop, I whispered. I didn't know why I said it out loud, but I did. And the scratching stopped immediately, as if whoever, whatever, was there had been waiting for me to speak. The next morning, I decided to knock on my neighbor's door. I needed to know what was happening. The door opened after a long pause. The woman standing there looked older than I'd imagined, maybe late 30s, pale, with eyes that seemed both tired and alert. She didn't smile. Yes, she said. I'm sorry to bother you, I began. I've been hearing noises. Knocking. From the wall between our apartments. I thought maybe. Her face changed, not fear exactly, but something like recognition mixed with frustration. You shouldn't talk through the wall, she said quietly. It listens. Before I could ask what she meant, she closed the door. The sound of the lock sliding into place was louder than it should have been. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop hearing her words echoing in my head. It listens. That night, I stayed awake with the lights on, trying to tell myself it was just a weird neighbor, a bad apartment, old pipes. But when the clock hit midnight, I felt it again, the faint vibration through the wall, like someone knocking from inside it. I didn't answer. But the thing on the other side didn't stop. I tried to convince myself that a building this old simply made sounds. Metal contracts, wood shifts, pipes rattle. I even searched online for explanations, pressure changes, water hammer, thermal expansion. There was always a reason. There had to be. For 2 nights, the noises stopped. I started to believe it was over, that maybe the neighbor's warning had meant something else, a private superstition. Then, on the 3rd night, I woke to the feeling of vibration under my pillow. Not sound, movement. Faint, steady, as if someone was tapping the wall from inside the plaster directly behind my headboard. I turned on the lamp. The room looked the same, but the air felt charged, heavier. I pressed my palm against the wall. It was cold, almost damp. The tapping continued for a few seconds, then shifted downward, sliding toward the floor like someone dragging their fingers behind the paint. I whispered, "Stop." And it did. Instantly. I lay back, eyes open, until morning light crept through the blinds. At work, I caught myself glancing at blank walls, conference rooms, corridors, elevators, half expecting to see them breathe. I was starting to feel ridiculous. When I returned home that evening, I found a thin line of white dust beneath the wall where the tapping had come from. Plaster, maybe. I touched it, it was soft and fine, like ash. That night, the neighbor's door was open again, only a crack. I hesitated, then knocked gently. Her voice came through, low and flat. "Don't. Please." I waited, unsure what to do. "Are you all right?" I asked. No reply, just the sound of something sliding across the floor on her side, a soft thump, then silence. When I woke the next morning, the smell hit me first, a sour, chemical odor that made my eyes water. It seeped through the shared wall. I went to the landlord's office again, but the door was locked, a note taped to it, "Back Monday." By evening, the smell had thickened. I put a towel under my door, opened the window, tried to ignore it. Around midnight, a noise jolted me upright. Not knocking, a thud, heavier, followed by a dragging scrape. Then nothing. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I waited 10 minutes before stepping into the hallway. The corridor lights flickered once, then steadied. Her door was closed. But there was something on the floor outside it, a dark smear that trailed a few inches, like someone had dragged a wet hand across the tiles. When I looked closer, I realized it wasn't wet anymore. It had dried, leaving a faint rust-colored line. I backed away slowly and locked myself in my apartment. For the next hour, I sat by the door, listening. The building was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing. Eventually, exhaustion won. I dozed off in the chair, the key still in the lock. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I heard a whisper right beside my ear, so close I could feel the breath of it. A woman's voice, hoarse, barely audible. It moved. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty. By Monday morning the smell was gone, replaced by something worse, silence. Even the pipes had gone still. The entire building felt like it was holding its breath. I told myself I'd knock on her door one more time, just to make sure she was all right, then stop obsessing. But when I stepped into the hallway, the door stood slightly open. It shouldn't have been. She never left it open. I hesitated, knocked gently on the frame. "Hello? It's me, from next door." Nothing. I pushed it a few inches. The hinge gave a soft sigh. Inside, the apartment looked the same as mine, same cheap furniture, same layout, except everything was too neat. The bed was made, the dishes stacked, but there was no sense of life. A cup sat on the counter, filled with water, and inside it floated a single key. I called her name, though I wasn't sure she'd ever told it to me. The sound of my own voice seemed wrong here. The air had that stale, heavy stillness of a room left shut for too long. Then I heard it, 3 soft knocks. Not from inside her place, from mine. The sound came through the shared wall, the one between our bedrooms. Slow, deliberate. I turned, staring at the pale paint as if I could see through it. I backed out of her apartment, closed the door behind me, and ran the few steps to my own. When I opened it, the noise stopped instantly. The lights flickered once. The air felt colder. The towel I'd wedged under my door to block the smell was gone. Just gone. I searched the floor, checked the kitchen, even looked under the bed. Nothing. Then I noticed something new on the wall, a small crack, no bigger than the length of my thumb, running vertically near the baseboard. White plaster flaked loosely around it. I knelt, ran a finger along it, and felt air. Cool, moving air. Something was inside that wall space. For the next hour, I tried to convince myself it was just ventilation, a gap in the structure, a draft. But the way the air pulsed, slow, rhythmic, like breathing, made my stomach twist. I put my ear to it. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, a sound like a heartbeat. Too slow to be mine. I jerked back and nearly fell. The room seemed smaller suddenly, as if the walls had inched closer. I grabbed my jacket and left, deciding to spend the night anywhere else, a friend's couch, even a 24-hour diner. But when I reached the lobby, the front door was chained from the inside. A new padlock hung there, gleaming. I called for the landlord. No answer. The office door was still locked, same note, "Back Monday." It was Monday now. I went back upstairs, thinking maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe stress was twisting things out of shape. But when I stepped into my hallway, something waited at my door, the towel. Folded neatly, placed in the center of the welcome mat. I don't remember unlocking the door, but suddenly I was inside again. The crack in the wall was larger now, the plaster around it darkened by moisture. I watched it for a long time, and in the dim light, I could swear it moved. Just slightly, like something inside was shifting closer. I packed a bag. Wallet, phone, keys. When I turned to leave, my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but instinct made me answer. A whisper, faint, female. The same voice I'd heard before, just above a breath. "Don't leave it alone." The call ended. I stared at the phone, at the silent wall, at the bag in my hand. I should have left. I knew that. But I didn't. I set the bag down, walked to the wall, and pressed my palm against the crack again. Something pressed back. The next morning, the building had changed again. The air felt thick, sour, as if the walls themselves were exhaling something stale. When I opened my door, I almost tripped over a shadow that wasn't supposed to be there, a man's outline cast across the floor from the hallway light. The landlord stood there, holding a ring of keys. He looked different now. His clothes were the same, his movement still slow, but there was something distracted about his eyes, like he was half awake. "You've been in the neighbor's flat," he said. Not a question. "I was worried," I said. "She's gone." "She left," he replied flatly. "Moved out last week." "That's not possible," I said. "I saw her 2 days ago." He shook his head, lips twitching slightly. "Not her. Not anymore." Before I could ask what he meant, he brushed past me and crouched beside the crack in the wall. He touched it gently, the way you touch a wound. "This wasn't supposed to open again." "Again?" I asked. He didn't answer. He stood, rubbed his hand on his trousers, leaving a pale streak of dust. "If you hear anything," he said, "don't talk back. It feeds on sound." Then he turned and walked away, slow and deliberate, the keys clinking softly at his side. For hours I just stood there, staring at the wall. The crack had widened overnight. You could see darkness behind it now, not shadow, exactly, more like the absence of anything. I tried to convince myself to leave, to pack my bag and go, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt tethered to that space, to that breathing air that pulsed in and out like something alive. That evening, I knocked on the landlord's door. No answer. His office was dark. The padlock on the front door was gone now, but I didn't try to leave. Somehow, the idea of stepping outside felt wrong, as if the world beyond the building had faded while I wasn't looking. When night came, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the crack. The air inside it shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. Then I heard it again, the tapping. Not just from the wall this time. From behind the refrigerator, under the floorboards, the ceiling. Everywhere. 3 knocks, a pause. 3 more. And then a sound that wasn't knocking, a low murmur, like someone repeating a phrase over and over again, too quiet to catch the words. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't stop. The whisper came from inside my head now. I ran to the wall, desperate, and shouted, "What do you want?" Silence. Then, softly, the reply. "Home." The floor beneath me trembled. A piece of plaster broke free and fell, revealing a darker hollow inside the wall. I saw something there, just for a second, not a face, but the impression of one, blurred like wet paint. Then it was gone. The smell returned, that same sweet rot from before. My stomach turned, and I stumbled back. On the wall, where the crack had opened, something new was written, faint lines traced in dust, forming words. "You shouldn't have listened." I didn't remember writing it. But the handwriting was mine. I decided to leave. There was nothing rational left to hold me there. The walls, the smell, the landlord's words, they could all belong to some trick of exhaustion, but my fear was real, solid in my chest. I packed what I could in minutes, barely thinking. The bag was half-zipped when I reached for the door handle. It didn't turn. I twisted harder. The latch rattled but stayed shut, as if something pressed from the other side. I tried the lock, the deadbolt, even the chain, but the handle wouldn't budge. My pulse pounded in my ears. I slammed my shoulder against it once, twice. Nothing. The air inside the apartment shifted, subtle but unmistakable, the faint vibration of movement behind the walls. The lights flickered. The refrigerator hummed once and died. The only sound left was a slow creaking, as if the building itself was bending. I ran to the window, but it wouldn't open either. My hands left smears on the glass, my breath fogged it until all I could see was my own reflection, pale, wild-eyed, mouth half open. For a moment, I thought I saw another reflection behind mine, just over my shoulder, watching. I turned. Nothing. The crack in the wall had widened again, reaching halfway up the plaster. I could see deeper now, wires, beams, and something else. A glint, like metal or glass. When I leaned closer, the air was colder. My breath vanished into it. Then, from deep inside the hollow, a voice, softer now, closer, clearer. "Help me." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No," I said. "No, you're not real." The voice didn't stop. It whispered my name. My name. I never told anyone in the building my name. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the hammer from my toolbox. I didn't think. I just swung. The plaster cracked, flakes of white bursting across the floor. I swung again, harder, until the hole was big enough to see what was inside. It was darkness. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw movement, a pale hand pressed against the inside of the drywall. Thin fingers, trembling. For a second, I thought I saw skin. Then the hand slipped back, vanishing into the shadows. I dropped the hammer and stumbled away. My breathing came in ragged bursts. The hole in the wall now seemed to pulse faintly, the air around it shimmering with heat or static. A faint hum began to fill the room, not mechanical, more like whispering in reverse. I shouted, "Who are you?" but the sound came out warped, echoing back at me from the walls, distorted and deeper. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything went silent. The light above me flickered once more and went out completely. In the darkness, something breathed. I could hear it, low and steady, matching my rhythm until I couldn't tell which breath was mine. I ran again to the door, yanking it, slamming my shoulder into it until pain shot down my arm. Then, finally, it opened, easily, like it had never been stuck. The hallway outside was empty. The lights flickered weakly, humming. I looked down the corridor. Every door on the floor was open. Every single one. Inside, darkness. A whisper floated through the air, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Don't leave it. I ran. Down the stairs, out the main door, into the cold morning light. The world outside felt unreal, washed out. I kept walking until my legs burned, until I couldn't hear anything except the sound of traffic and my own heartbeat. When I finally looked back, the building stood still and quiet against the gray sky. Every window was dark. I told myself I would never go back. But as I reached into my pocket for my phone, I found something that hadn't been there before, a small piece of plaster, white dust coating my fingertips, and drawn on it in pencil. It followed you. I didn't go to work. I walked until the city blurred into rows of faceless buildings and gray sky, until my legs trembled and my hands stopped shaking. I found a cheap hotel near the train station, the kind that smelled like bleach and hopelessness, and paid cash for one night. The woman at the desk didn't even look up. Inside the room, the air felt safe, neutral. Beige walls, buzzing fluorescent light, thin curtains that didn't quite close. I dropped onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. I told myself this was over. I was out. Whatever was in that building could rot there for all I cared. But around midnight, I woke up to the sound of breathing. It wasn't mine. It came from under the bed, slow, shallow, uneven. The kind of breathing that sounds aware. I froze, every muscle tight, listening. When I finally moved, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Nothing. The floor was empty. Then I saw the wall. The wallpaper had bubbled outward, forming a small, swollen lump near the headboard. It pulsed slightly, the way wet paint does when something moves behind it. I stepped closer, light trembling in my hand. The bulge expanded, then contracted, like a lung. No, I whispered. No, you're not here. But the lump grew larger, the surface splitting with a faint, sticky sound. Something white and powdery drifted to the floor, plaster dust. It wasn't the same wall, but the same pattern. 3 faint knocks sounded inside it, muffled but unmistakable. Then, the whisper, home. I stumbled back, slamming my shoulder into the doorframe. My hand found the doorknob, slick with sweat. When I yanked it open, the hallway outside was dark, darker than it should have been. The fluorescent light flickered once, then died. Somewhere behind me, the whisper came again, closer this time. You took it. I ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, into the street. The night was cold and empty, the city strangely quiet, like sound itself had been swallowed. At the corner, a man stared at me. His clothes were soaked, as if he'd walked through rain that no one else felt. He smiled, not kindly, just knowingly, and said, "You shouldn't have opened the wall." "How do you know about that?" I asked. He tilted his head. "It doesn't stay where it's buried." Then he turned and walked away, vanishing into the fog. I stood there shaking until dawn. When the sun came up, I tried calling the landlord again. The number was disconnected. I looked up the address online. There was nothing, no listing, no records. It was as if the building didn't exist. I went back anyway. I had to see it. The street was still there, but where the building had stood was an empty lot, weeds, rubble, a chain-link fence. No sign of demolition, no debris, just absence. And yet, when the wind shifted, I heard it again. 3 knocks. I turned. On the inside of my jacket pocket, a faint smear of white dust marked the fabric, like fingers had pressed from within. The whisper came again, this time inside my head, steady, familiar. Don't leave it alone. I ripped the jacket off and threw it to the ground. But even as I watched it lie still in the dirt, I knew it wasn't over. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The screen filled with a single word, home. I dropped it. It kept vibrating, rattling against the pavement until the sound turned into knocking, 3 short, deliberate taps. And somewhere deep inside me, something answered. By the time the sun came up again, I was miles away. I didn't remember taking the train, but the rhythm of it still hummed under my skin, that same 3-beat pattern. Every station name blurred into another. I had no plan, no destination. Just the need to keep moving. In the reflection of the window, I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked hollow, skin too pale. There was dust in my hair, white, fine, clinging. I tried to brush it off, but it only smeared deeper. When I finally stepped off the train, I ended up in a small town I didn't know. I booked another cheap room above a bar, hoping the noise would drown everything out. It didn't. The knocking had changed, softer now, irregular, like a pulse that had synced with mine. I tried to write it all down, to make sense of it, to see if maybe this was just me. Stress, hallucination, something explainable. But every time I began a sentence, the words rearranged themselves. I'd write "it came from the wall," and by the time I looked again, it said, "it came from within." That was when I stopped trying to rationalize. I began remembering things, flashes from before I moved into that building. I saw a different wall, in a different apartment. I saw plaster dust under my nails. I remembered the sound of knocking even then, faint but there. And the landlord's face, maybe I'd seen it somewhere before. It wasn't that the thing had followed me. It had always been with me. That idea should have terrified me, but it didn't. It felt like recognition. Like remembering a word that's been on the tip of your tongue for years. The knocking, the voices, the breathing, they weren't invading. They were answering. Late that night, I caught my reflection again in the cracked mirror above the sink. For a second, it didn't move with me. It tilted its head when I didn't. I should have looked away, but I didn't. I stepped closer instead. Who are you? I whispered. My reflection smiled, small, tired, almost kind. Then it spoke, though its lips didn't move. I've been waiting for you to listen. The mirror rippled faintly, and behind my reflection I saw the same apartment, the pale walls, the narrow hallway, the crack spreading upward like a vein. The same image I'd left behind. I turned around, and the hotel room was gone. I was back there. Back inside that building that no longer existed. The air smelled of dust and metal and something faintly sweet. The walls breathed again, softly, rhythmically, in sync with my own. And I realized the truth wasn't that it had followed me. I had never left. The door behind me was gone. The floor felt soft under my feet, like the ground itself was hollow. In the wall, the crack had widened into a doorway. On the other side was darkness, not threatening, just endless. Familiar. I stepped closer. The air shimmered, faint whispers curling through it. My own voice among them. Don't leave it alone. I smiled then. Not from madness, not from fear. From understanding. Whatever lived in those walls, whatever voice I'd been hearing, it wasn't something else. It was the part of me that had been buried too long. The silence I'd mistaken for safety. And now, finally, it was awake. Time stopped meaning anything. There were no mornings, no nights, just the steady rhythm of breath through the walls. Sometimes it was loud, sometimes it faded, but it was always there, like the tide against a shore that no one visits anymore. I learned to stop fighting it. At first I tried to measure the days, scratching marks into the plaster until the wall healed them overnight. I tried talking to the thing, to myself, to see if words would change anything. They didn't. All that ever came back was an echo, soft and patient, as if it already knew what I was going to say. Eventually I stopped asking questions. I began to listen. The building wasn't empty. I could feel others breathing through the walls, their rhythm overlapping with mine, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each one pulsing faintly behind the plaster, trapped or waiting. I couldn't tell which. When I pressed my palm against the surface, the wall pressed back, not like a barrier but like skin. Warm. Living. I walked the hallways sometimes, barefoot, counting doors that never opened. The lights no longer flickered. They just burned steady and low, like candle flames behind glass. The air was still heavy with that sweet, metallic scent, but I didn't mind it anymore. It felt familiar now, almost comforting. At night, or what passed for it, I would lie on the floor and listen to the hum that ran through the pipes. It wasn't electricity. It was a voice, stretched so thin it became sound itself. It told me things I already knew, things I'd forgotten. That the walls weren't prisons. That they were memories. That what I called fear was only the part of me that wanted to stay separate from everything else. Sometimes I thought about the city, the streets, the people, the noise, and tried to remember if any of it had ever felt real. It didn't anymore. It felt like a dream someone else had told me once, one I'd mistaken for my own. The crack in the wall is wider now, a doorway that never fully opens. When I stand before it, I can see faint shapes moving beyond, outlines that look like rooms, or maybe reflections of rooms. I used to be afraid to cross over. Now I think I already have. I keep the lights on, though I don't need them. The glow makes the walls shimmer, soft and breathing. Sometimes I think I see the woman from before, standing just out of focus beyond the doorway. She doesn't speak. She just watches, like she's waiting to see if I'll understand. And I do. This is what peace feels like, not escape, not safety. Just stillness. The knocking hasn't stopped, but it no longer frightens me. It's slower now, deeper, like a heartbeat syncing with my own. Every time it happens, I breathe with it. In. Out. In. Out. When I close my eyes, I can feel the walls stretching outward endlessly, filled with the rhythm of all the others who learned what I did, that there's no leaving. There never was. And strangely, that thought calms me. The thing in the wall isn't trying to get out anymore. And I'm not trying to leave. We're the same. It's quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that follows noise, but the deeper kind, the kind that swallows sound before it's even born. The kind that feels like the world holding its breath. I sit by the wall, my back against it, the plaster warm against my skin. I can feel the rhythm pulsing through it, not separate anymore, but joined. There's no boundary between my heartbeat and the sound behind the surface. They rise and fall together, a single motion. Sometimes I think about how it started. A building. A neighbor. A knock. Now it feels like I dreamed those things. Maybe I did. Maybe that's how it begins for everyone, with a sound that doesn't belong, until it does. The doorway in the wall glows faintly, not with light but with something softer, like breath made visible. I can see movement beyond it, shapes that shift like water, human outlines that fade as soon as I try to focus. They don't scare me anymore. They feel like memories taking form. When I reach out, the air ripples. It's warm. It feels like touching another pulse. I could step through now. I think I already have. I remember the landlord's voice, or maybe it was mine, saying. It listens. It always did. I just never realized I was the one speaking. Every question I asked, every fear I fed, it heard. And it grew, taking the shape of my own silence. I wonder how long I've been here. I don't think time passes in this place. I sleep, or something like it, and when I wake, the cracks on the walls have changed shape. They look like veins, spreading outward, carrying life instead of decay. The other voices are closer now. Sometimes I can hear laughter, faint, hollow, but not unkind. Sometimes a whisper brushes my ear, words I don't quite catch. I used to think they were trapped souls, but maybe they're just the echoes of those who stopped running. There's no fear left. Only rhythm. The walls don't breathe anymore. I do, for both of us. When I press my hand against the plaster, it doesn't feel solid. It gives slightly, like skin. I can feel something inside it move, slow, deliberate, almost human. It's waiting. I think about the city. The people walking past that empty lot, seeing nothing but weeds and rubble. Maybe they'll feel it someday, a vibration underfoot, a hum in the air, a pattern they can't quite name. Maybe one of them will move in next door to silence that feels too heavy. Maybe they'll hear it first, 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced. I smile at the thought. The sound has to go somewhere. I stand and face the wall. My reflection is there again, faint and shimmering, watching me. It nods once, like it understands. I take a breath, long, steady, and step forward. The surface folds inward, soft as water, closing behind me without a sound. And for a moment, I am everywhere the walls have ever stood. Then there is only stillness. Only home.